Hello, everybody. We're group 3, and we're Charlie, Sage, Vinny, and Mona. And our today presentation is on Volkswagen Dieselgate scam. Our thesis statement is that Volkswagen was unethical under the justice view because they violated legal rules, standards, and created an equal economic opportunity. So, Volkswagen recently brought down to its knees when scientists in West Virginia University discovered the company was installed a device in its diesel-powered cars to fool the emission test. They installed emission software on more than 500,000 diesel cars in the US and roughly about 10.5 million cars all around the world, and allowed the census the unique parameters of an emission drive cycle set by the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the EPA. In the test mode, the car was fully compliant with all federal emission levels. But when driving normally, the computer switched it to a separate mode, which means it changed the fuel pressure in the engine to get higher mileage and power on the road. As a result, it was producing heavier nitrogen oxide emission, which is a gas for pretty much linked to lung cancer. So on September 18, 2015, EPA issued a notice of violation of Clear Air Act to Volkswagen. And by 2016, the US District Court approved and finalized $14.7 billion settlement and $10 billion to buy back cars. By 2020, the scandal cost Volkswagen $33.3 billion. However, the CEO apologized to American people and promised big changes ahead after the plunged economy. And by 2019, Volkswagen again emerged as the world #1 automotive company, which pretty much beating the Toyota and GM cars. Next.
All right, so the issue, we have 3 major issues here. The first one was that VW was very deceitful. So what they did was they fitted vehicles with sophisticated software to try to trick the emission system. So they understood that it would not pass the emission standards on the road. So they wanted to make sure that they could trick the test to show that their vehicles are actually supposed to be safe on the road. VW was only focused on maximizing profits. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to pass the testing purely for public image. So people thought that these cars were actually environmentally safe. They intentionally tricked the EPA for the US customers. They wanted to keep those vehicles at a low cost for the customer base, and they didn't want to spend the extra money for the different filters because they wanted to keep that cost low so that they can increase the amount of people that were buying their vehicles. And so what they did was they used climate change as an excuse. So they claimed to lower CO2 levels, they claimed to improve climate change, but in reality, what they were doing was actually increasing the nitrogen oxide emissions 15 to 35 times higher. So we have several ethical issues here. The main one is the justice view, which is defined as ethical behavior treats people impartially and fairly. And simply what they did here was just not fair. So VW violated the justice view by 4 different things. They violated procedural justice, which is fair policies and rules. And what they did was they obstructed justice. So as soon as they were getting caught up in this mess, people figured out what was going on. They got rid of all their paperwork. They also violated environmental justice by intentionally violating the Clean Air Act. They also created unequal economic opportunities by deceptive trade practices. So they were lying about their vehicle emissions. And they were also violating commutative justice, which means fairness of exchanges. So the customers that were buying these vehicles didn't have the relevant information to make an informed decision. What they thought they were doing was actually good for the environment, and instead it was actually causing the environment more harm.
So some items that can be correlated to the text. The individualist view. The individualist view focuses on long-term advancements of self-interest. The disregard for the environment and general wellness. The Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal was a deliberate display of the organization advancing its own personal agenda, regardless of the impact on the environment and on general wellness. The second correlation that can be observed is cultural relativism. Suggests there is no one right way to behave. Cultural context determines ethical behavior. So American culture and its influence surrounding the scandal. Did American culture play a role in Volkswagen's decision to fabricate this lie and then perpetuate it? The third is ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemma can be defined as a situation that, although offering potential benefit or gain, is also unethical. So when Volkswagen was faced with this ethical dilemma, they chose wrong. They made the conscious decision to take the immoral path. Next slide, please.
So VW was ultimately found guilty. In fact, in January of 2017, they pled guilty because clearly they knew what they were doing was wrong. It was unethical. So the first thing they were found guilty for was conspiracy to commit fraud. So they intentionally violated the Clean Air Act. They also obstructed justice. So as soon as they were getting caught up in the mess, they decided to destroy their documents. The next thing that they were found guilty for was entry of goods for by false statement. So they were providing continuously false information about their vehicle emission limits. Once again, the customers thought that they were doing the right thing and improving the environment, and instead the emissions were far exceeding what they were supposed to be. And they were providing false information very consistently.
So, resolution of issue. Lawsuits. The U.S. District Court judge approved a $14.7 billion settlement. On January 4th, 2016, the U.S. Department of Justice first sued Volkswagen on behalf of the EPA. On October 25th, 2016, the U.S. District Court Judge Charles Breyer approved the final $14.7 billion settlement to compensate car owners and address environmental harm. This settlement involved 3 federal agencies suing the automaker for its excessive diesel emissions. At the time, this was the highest ever paid by a company for violations under the Clean Air Act. Next, stipulations. Volkswagen ordered to amend or recall affected vehicles. The government required that 85% of nearly 475,000 afflicted TDIs be fixed or removed from the road by June 30th, 2019. So the third is prosecution. Executives charged and fines implemented. Oliver Schmidt, whose mugshot can be observed on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, he was the Volkswagen's AG executive who was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay a $400,000 fine. A total of 8 current and former executives were charged with various crimes. Next slide, please.
Hey guys, so fast forward to the present. Volkswagen has since recovered from the $33 billion in civil lawsuits in the US alone. It's still widely curious to how far back the emission skirting policies actually stretch back to. This scandal actually almost proved near fatal for diesel engines market-wide. And then in 2015, Volkswagen actually stopped the production of all their diesel cars and has since made a successful pivot towards mass producing electric vehicles. In 2022 alone, Volkswagen sold over 330,000 electric vehicles. Next slide, please. So recommendations. To achieve a positive turnaround, the company sought to replace leadership. They fired all their top executives in charge of overseeing emissions guidelines. The U.S.-based executive Oliver Schmidt, like Sage was saying, was fined $400,000 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. In December of 2022, he was released from a U.S. prison per his terms and was sent back to Germany to finish out the remainder of his sentence. With that, the company also decided to restructure the organization. They came up with a new strategy and rebranded a new product, which became their electric vehicles, and has since been a mass success. Next slide, please. So yeah, here's a list of all of our references for our project. Excellent. Thank you, guys. It's been fun. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.